Hello, I'm Richard Gisbert, and you're at The Listening Post. This week, media freedom under threat from the Arab League. The new TV preachers whose popularity is scaring governments across the Middle East. And counting the votes in the U.S. election. November's results today.
Despite the leak, all of the presidential candidates have so far said they'll continue their campaigns.
Welcome back. Satellite television channels like the one you're watching this broadcast on have revolutionized news in the Middle East over the past decade. Before channels like Al Jazeera existed, news consumers across the Arabic-speaking world depended on state-run television for information. But now there are signs that Arab governments who don't like the scrutiny that comes with news coverage are moving to muzzle critical voices. Our starting point this week, a joint Egyptian-Saudi Arabian initiative to rewrite the rules of TV journalism in the Middle East, what the new code of conduct says, and what it may mean for the flow of information. Crackdowns on freedom of expression in the Arab world are not new. However, when the Arab League convened in Cairo and drafted its new code of conduct, it went further than ever before. It wasn't targeting one channel or one particular journalist. It was rewriting the rules for satellite broadcasters right across the region, 22 countries. And the authors of those new rules, Egypt and Saudi Arabia, made it clear they were serious.
As Egypt is behind this meeting and these proposals, we will make it our priority to be the first ones to implement them across the Egyptian satellite stations.
That the initiative came from those two countries was not particularly a surprise. That so many governments endorsed it, that was, we felt, a very, very negative and indeed depressing move for the region. These are two governments that have played regionally a major negative role as far as freedom of the press is concerned.
The new broadcast charter stipulates that satellite news channels should not damage social harmony, national unity, public order, or traditional values. That the news channels are not to offend the leaders or national or religious symbols of Arab countries. And the charter gives authorities the right to withdraw, freeze, or not renew the work permits of media which break the regulations.
The people who wrote this thing say that regulation's needed. You can't have satellite television with no regulation. It's a free-for-all. Absolutely true. Any country in the world you look at, there are regulations around satellite television, ordinary television, other forms of media. The difference between this and the FCC in the US or the regulatory bodies in Europe and UK is that this is politics. If you say something that I don't like, I can shut you down. Big difference between that kind of a system and a system like you have in the West.
Each country can interpret the rules as it pleases, so I think it'll be very problematic for broadcasters to know whether they've crossed the lines or not. The threat alone might be enough to keep media and television organizations in line. Or there might be, as we've seen with bloggers and newspapers, there might be examples made of certain broadcasters that fall foul of the wording to keep everyone else in line.
The curbs on satellite news output were endorsed by 20 of the 22 nations of the Arab League. Lebanon was one exception. Qatar, the home of Al Jazeera, was the other. The channel's Director General, Wada Kanfar, said there should be independent legal processes to resolve these issues, he said. The region has seen the recent emergence of many media institutions, and every attempt should be made not to hamper, but to facilitate an environment to encourage their independence and freedom. Lebanon's refusal to sign the charter reflects its broadcast reality. It has a factionalized but relatively open media landscape.
The principles and foundations proposed today are not binding. In fact, many of them may not complement existing rules and regulations within the Arab League nations. We will not be introducing these rules as we do not wish to restrict freedom in this way.
We need to celebrate the position by Qatar and Lebanon on that particular issue. It's within the context of the politics of the region. It is a very courageous decision. Lebanon has always stand in the region as the model where a free press and free civil society have managed to to emerge and develop without too many governmental constraints.
That model, however, is the exception in the region rather than the rule. Arab governments, which used to control what television their people were watching, are still struggling to adapt in the age of pan-Arab news channels.
Arab governments still have their finger in the electronic dike. They're trying to find ways to stop this flow of information that keeps bursting out in this direction or that direction. So one day they're after the internet, another day they're after print media, and today, as it were, they're after satellite broadcasters.
News channels tend to offer various types of programs. Their rolling hourly newscasts are staples, but it's the talk shows that run between the news bulletins, broadcasts that usually offer more opinion than fact, that the Arab League says it's more concerned with.
They have realized that the content of these programs on Al Jazeera have been actually, in brackets, instigating Arab audiences to demand more rights and to work towards power sharing, something that these regimes do not want.
Even if the governments that signed the charter only want to rein in the talk shows a little and leave the news coverage alone, the problem with the code of conduct is the way it's worded. It's vague, wide open to interpretation, and the lack of specifics in the law serve as alarm bells for any journalist interested in safeguarding freedom of expression.
I think it's quite a confusing situation for the media now, and I think what we'll be seeing is more precedent by example, rather than seeing that there are certain, hard and fast rules that they should abide by, that there may be punitive measures made against certain broadcasters to show the rest of the industry that, don't cross this line there, otherwise this is what we're going to do.
So the real reaction is not only going to come from media-free, so-called free media organizations, but actually will come soon, I think, by the Arab audiences protesting, and they have started to protest against this charter which aims at curbing any free media or any voice that will contradict the hegemonic voice ran by the Saudi and Egyptian media organizations.
Our Global Village Voices now and their views on how the Arab League's code of conduct will change things.
I think in the short term, this charter is going to have a chilling effect on journalism in the Arab world and increase the pressure on journalists to self-censor potentially controversial stories. This is because the charter has gotten a huge amount of press attention recently, and also because the language of what is forbidden is extremely vague. I think in the long term, we're probably going to revert to the status quo, which is harassment after the fact, after journalists publish or broadcast something that is deemed offensive or potentially subversive.
I think the main issue here is political. There are talk shows and there are phone-in programs which are hugely popular, and people call in and they, for example, talk about calls for a caliphate and Islamic governance to return to the region. This is at variance with maintaining the status quo. And so this leaves the regimes feeling very threatened, and so they have no choice but to seek to ban and clamp down on those programs and those voices.
My problem with what the Arab League is trying to do is that it's trying to impose the opinions of the government and not the people. And let's not forget there's a lot of governments in the Middle East that still have issues with being representative of their peoples in terms of elections, etc. So my concern with this attempt would be that it does not reflect the concerns of the people.
It's not every broadcast that offers viewers a chance to be seen and heard on what's right or wrong about news coverage around the world, but if you email us at listeningpost@aljazeera.net, we'll find a way to get you on the air as one of our Global Village Voices. Time now for Listening Post News Bites. A 2-hour-long worldwide YouTube blackout has been blamed on Pakistan and what YouTube calls erroneous internet protocols that have been sourced to that country. Pakistani authorities say they were trying to block access in Pakistan to this site, but when they ordered internet service providers to block YouTube, the result was a temporary global blackout. The government says it made the move because of content that it deemed to be offensive to Islam. However, one group of bloggers has theorized the authorities also wanted to stop Pakistanis from seeing videos that accuse the government of vote rigging in the recent general election. The violent protests in Serbia that targeted foreign embassies following Kosovo's declaration of independence have also hit the media there. B92, a popular independent TV channel that began life as a youth radio station in 1989, was besieged for several hours by a mob threatening to burn it to the ground. The protesters, who burned EU and US flags, accused the station of a pro-Western bias. According to B92 CEO, it took several calls to Serbia's Ministry of the Interior before enough police were sent to clear the protesters. The Malaysian government has managed to mute 2 newspapers who have resisted pressure to toe the party line. By refusing to renew the licenses of the Oriental Daily and the Tamil language Makala Ose, the government has forced the papers to all but abandon coverage of opposition parties in the run-up to the March 8th general election, or risk being shut down completely. After 5 decades in power, the ruling Barisan Nasional coalition has been using force to quell multiple political street protests in Kuala Lumpur. However, coverage of those demos in the Malaysian media has been limited. An Iranian journalist is on death row in the Islamic Republic, and the government there has been accused of torturing him. Yaqub Mirnahad, a journalist for the liberal Maradom Salari newspaper, has been accused of belonging to Jundala, which the Iranian government calls a terrorist group. Jundala is from the poor Baluchistan area of Iran and has been responsible for several atrocities. Reports from within Iran suggest Mirnahad has been tortured by the authorities. His family has said he may be executed to hide evidence of his mistreatment. And an interesting backstory has emerged in the battle between John McCain and the New York Times over a story the paper published about the candidate.
I'm very disappointed in the New York Times piece. It's not true.
A front-page article in the Times suggested that the Republican front-runner, who's married, had an improper relationship with a female lobbyist 8 years ago. Times reporters had been working on the story for months, but editors kept holding the piece back. 2 of the 4 reporters assigned to the story resigned from the paper. A U.S. political magazine, The New Republic, has reported the Times only put the story into print once the magazine started working on a piece about the battle within the Times over the merits of the McCain story. We like the story about the behind-the-scenes squabbling even better than the one that the paper actually printed. Coming up after the break, the preachers bringing religion to Arab TV.